Jericho. Old Testament, Joshua. Jericho, New Testament, Zacchaeus. Of all people, an icon in the Old Testament. And I'm not sure what we would call Zacchaeus at the top of the sermon, but we'll get to that. Here's the scripture which comes this morning from Luke chapter 19, verses 1 through 10. If you have your Bibles, I would love to hear those pages rustle as you turn to it. Luke 19, verses 1 through 10. He, Jesus, entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and he was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and he climbed a sycamore tree to see him because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and he said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. Now all who saw it began to grumble and said, "He's gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner." Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay him back 4 times as much." Then Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." Jericho, Old Testament, New Testament, makes no difference. It was an extremely important town in Bible times, and if we're to truly appreciate the story of Zacchaeus and what he did, we need to understand a little bit about Jericho. Now, the battle that Joshua fought really is an interesting thing, and those of you who are Bible scholars probably know that Joshua and his armies and the people of Israel laid siege to the walled city of Jericho, but they couldn't get in. So Joshua, in his faith, asked God, "What do I do?" And God told him to do the strangest thing. And occasionally I look at this story and think, I really wish I could have seen what was going on, because what God told Joshua to do was get your folks together, and every day for 6 days I want you to have a parade. And I want every one of you, with the armies in front and the people who've been back and the ark going with you, I want you to make one big circle around the walled city of Jericho. Now think about the people inside that walled city when they looked out and saw all these fools marching around their city one time every day, going all the way around and coming back and stopping where they started, with the soldiers, with the ark, and with the people. This went on for 6 days, and then God told Joshua, "Now, let's see what happens. On the 7th day, I want you and all of your entourage and the priests to go around the circle 7 times. And I want the priests blowing the long horns." You know what the real name of those are? I'm going to teach you a word. What is it, Amy?
Shofar.
The shofar, a ram's horn. And I want you to take those horns and I want you to blow it as you go all the way around that place 7 times. So the people did. Now think about the racket that was going on, and think about the unrest that was going on in the minds and in the hearts of the people inside that. And then God's last command was, after you have made 7 circuits around the city, I want all of the priests that have a ram's horn to take as deep a breath as they possibly can and blow on that sucker and sustain that ram's horn for as long as you possibly can. And after that has happened, and the cacophony from the ram's horn has ended. He said, I want you to instruct all of the people, the army, the citizens, everybody, to raise their voice in one holy, loud shout. Joshua passed that on to the men and the women. They did what they were told. They stopped. The priest blew the ram's horn. The people all shouted with joy. And what happened? The walls came tumbling down. You know, the old spiritual would have us believe that there was a big fight and that Joshua just really went there and creamed it. But that's not how it worked. God is the one who made it all happen. Had nothing to do with Joshua's prowess as a general or anything else. Had nothing to do with how many men he had. It had to do with God. But there we see early on what an important city that Jericho was. And it was important in Old Testament times. It was even more important to us in New Testament times today and in our story of Zacchaeus, because Jericho lay right next to the Jordan River. And I've told you about looking when I was in Israel and over there 2 years ago, looking down from Mount Nebo and how the land is desolate and barren until you look far enough to see the valley of the Jordan River and the delta and the beautiful, lush greenness. And that's where Jericho lay, was in that lush greenness. And her location not only was in the midst of a very fertile area, her location was right on the route of one of the main approaches to Jerusalem. And she controlled that approach. Not only that, where she lay on the Jordan River, she controlled crossing the Jordan River for travelers and traders who wanted to get to the eastern side of the Jordan River. So Jordan was not only situated right, Jordan was right because it was in a place to make money for certain people. Now I want you to think, before we go on to the money part of it, I want you to get a mental image in your mind of how beautiful Jordan is, because there's going to be a paradox and a contrast. Jericho, the city, was in the midst of a magnificent date palm forest. And from those mighty date palm trees, and you all have been down south, and you've seen how high date palms grow, from those trees came wonderful fruit, wonderful dates, that the people of Jericho gathered together and took wherever they could to sell. Not only that, there were groves of balsam wood. And if you're familiar with balsam wood, it's very, very aromatic. And the air all around Jericho was just so fragrant and so beautiful, and you could smell the balsam wood for miles. In historical books, the people back then called Jericho the City of Palms. Josephus, I love this, Josephus called it a divine region, the fattest in Palestine. So everything combined to make this one of the largest taxation centers in Palestine. And we know from our study of the Bible the enormous amount of money that was collected for the government by the tax collectors. But we also know about the huge amount of money that the tax collectors were able to scrape off and put in their own pockets. And that, this morning, in the important city of Jericho, is where we find our man Zacchaeus. Now you got to understand, my friends, Zacchaeus wasn't just your garden variety tax collector, and there were a bunch of them. How does it describe him in the Bible? It says he was the chief tax collector. Now your translation may use another adjective there, but he was at the top of the pyramid. Think about Mary Kay. Think about the pyramids. And he not only got the money that he skimmed off himself and it went into his pocket, but there were tax collectors underneath him who were skimming it, and he got some of theirs too. So he was just raking it in, hand over fist, and had more than he could think about. The sad thing is, Zacchaeus may have been wealthy, but he was very, very unhappy. Zacchaeus, for all of his money, had no fulfillment. No doubt at all, he was quite lonely because the people of Jericho loathed him. And somewhere in his background, and we don't know where, Zacchaeus had heard about this Jesus. And he wanted to know more about him. So he thought about it. And he thought, I really need to find out about this Jewish fellow who's wandering around, who they say welcomes tax collectors and sinners. And Zacchaeus was aware. He certainly knew he was a tax collector, but in his heart, he knew that he was doing wrong. Just like, my friends, in our hearts, when we stray from God's path, don't we know it? Don't we know it? We know when we're doing wrong. So Zacchaeus determined to see Jesus, and he would allow nothing to stop him. So he headed to where he knew Jesus was going to be. And it must have taken courage for him to go down and mingle with the huge crowd that had gathered. But he had to do it because it was the only way he could see Jesus. But it gave those people who he had raked their money into his pocket, it gave them an opportunity to have him in their midst where they could elbow him maybe, or give him a good kick, or maybe punch him, or give him a push. You know, you can do all sorts of things when you're disguised by a crowd. And let me tell you, what makes you angrier than when somebody gets into your billfold that doesn't have any business there? So Zacchaeus knew he was stepping into a situation that maybe could be dangerous for him, but he was so anxious to see what this man Jesus offered that he took the chance, and he did not miss the opportunity to see him. Now the problem was, even though he could absorb the punches and the kicks and the pushes and the physical abuse, he was short. And he couldn't see above the crowd. And the crowd realized this, and what delight do you think they took, knowing that this little dude that they detested was trying to see Jesus, and they're going to go and they're going to stand here, or they're going to stand there, or they're going to stand here. And Zacchaeus can't see the one he's come to see. Zacchaeus looked at the situation, figured it all out, that he can't see Jesus because of the crowd, and he had to do something quickly. Think with me. Think with me now. When we think of the story of Zacchaeus and Jesus, and once we get past the song about Zacchaeus was a wee little man and a wee little man was he, and we can all sing that, how many characters are there in the story? Who are they? Zacchaeus and Jesus. But maybe there's a third one. Look at the front of your bulletin. John Bennett, you did an outstanding job. Look at the front of your bulletin and look and see how the meeting between Zacchaeus, or where Jesus sees Zacchaeus, what is that meeting framed in? What frames the meeting of Zacchaeus and Jesus?
The tree.
The tree. The tree. That's how Zacchaeus got to see Jesus Christ. He climbed up in that tree so he could look over the obstacles. So that the massive throngs around him didn't stop